And we're live.
Hi.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you all so much for joining. And for those of you who are tuning in on the viewer side, because I already see some people popping up on the viewer side, thank you for joining our New Year's live author chats. This is the last one, the grand finale, and it's with the writers of Rohan. So we have Matthew Romeo and DM Sontag, Sean Donovan, and Luke Courtney here today, who are just some of the craziest and most exciting bunch in the Instagram author community that I've found.
Try.
So we were just talking about how they haven't done a live since July. So this is like a special way to kick off the new year. But for viewers who don't know who all of us are, or maybe who only knew who one or two of us are, why don't we just go through and introduce ourselves? We'll start with Matt and just go clockwise around the screen, and I'll go last.
Cool. Well, I'm Matthew Romeo. I am the author of the Maven Knight trilogy, which is completely finished thanks to 2021. It's one of the highlights of that year.
Yay!
I am presently working on a fantasy series as well, the Seaworth Chronicles 10-book series that I'm sending queries out for right now. So we'll see how that turns out. But yeah, I am a science fiction and fantasy author.
Hi, I'm DM Sontag. I'm the author of the Kingdom Isles series. The Lightning Bride was my debut novel, October 2020, and then I released The Golden Wolf August of 2021, and I have plans to release the third of the main trilogy this year, and as well as two more novellas. I already have one novella out, and that's The Mermaid Shadow. And it's nautical fantasy, and that's what I'm writing right now, but in the future I have so many genres planned and so many story ideas. So.
Yay!
Okay, so I'm Luke Courtney. I'm the author of the Argent Blade series, which is urban stroke dark fantasy. I'm also the author of the Phoenix Saga, beginning with From the Ashes, that you see here. I've also written a children's story, Two Horn, and I'm currently working on both the next book in the Phoenix Saga, as well as a new fantasy series, which is the opening book of which is entitled The Girl Who Sings to Dragons, which I'm aiming to hopefully have finished and start querying about before the middle of the end of this year. So that's the plan.
All right, and I am Sean Donovan. I don't have any novels published at the moment. I'm going to be querying my work in progress novel, Black Sky Curse, this year. I do have a few short stories published through some indie press magazines. I mostly write fantasy and science fiction, and when I write short stories, I kind of dabble in horror a little bit.
We're so excited to see what Sean is getting ready to put out.
Yes.
I spent most of my year last year going, when is it coming?
I'm afraid.
Yeah, Sean, that's what we're all asking is when is it coming?
Exactly. I want to read that. You sell it so well on Instagram. I want to read it.
It's always the dreaded question.
I also forgot to plug. Here's my book. Everyone else is plugging, so.
Sean's gonna have to auction off beta read slots and be like, highest bidder gets to be on the beta read team.
Arc Read is going to be like, all right, first come, first serve. Good luck.
And then I'm Catherine D. Graham. I'm a epic fantasy, dark fantasy author. Not as quite as dark as Luke yet, but I may cross that bridge this year. My first book, The Vow That Twisted Fate, came out last summer, and so I feel like I'm a little bit of a newbie compared to Matthew and Luke and DM something. It's like, but you can get there, Sean.
I'm working on
that first book is like the icebreaker, and then it just tumbles out after that.
Yeah, I swear with the first book you're writing it for years, and then the next book it's like, oh, I did that like way quicker. Why couldn't I do that with the first book?
Oh God, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So we're so excited because we actually get to share what is coming up for 2022. That's the point of the live, and thank you to our viewer on Facebook who's already given us a like. You guys can drop your questions about any of these amazing authors and or their books in the comments, and we'll answer them live as we go through. But since we went sort of clockwise, we're going to sort of go reverse. So, Sean, you're up first.
Oh, boy.
No pressure. Tell us what you got going for 2022.
Okay, so like I said, the big goal is to finish this current book, and I would like to have it traditionally published. So like Matt and Luke have mentioned, I want to have it send out queries. I'm polishing it right now. I've been polishing for years, so nothing new. So that's my main goal, is to at least get it out to agents, get it into people's hands. At the same time, draft the sequel so that when I say serious potential, I'm not being like more to come later, and I can be like, here you go. I also have a few short story ideas, one drafted, that I would like to have submitted, possibly published. Like all writing goes, I was like, I'll only have a few. And then on New Year's Eve, I was like, no, I've got a new idea. And so I've been working on that in the last few days. That's been really fun. I think those are my main, I guess you could say, numeric attainable goals. Otherwise, I'd like to work in new genres, kind of play with other ideas I've had in the past, and just sort of change up my writing style a bit for when it comes to at least short stories. I don't want to play too much with novels, because those things are monstrous.
Yours are.
Fair enough.
And do we have more behind the pens coming? Because those are
Yes.
so cool. Sean is like the Reels king of
Yes,
Instagram.
yeah.
Oh my gosh,
Comedy
Comedy
King.
King, yes.
Actually, I do have an idea that involves probably their books, like you guys' books, in terms of I think we've joked about it, where it's guessing what the book will be about just based on the title.
Oh.
So I want to make a series of reels or TikToks or whatever about that. And yeah, so I'm excited to make more reels. I've kind of taken a break because doing all of them for NaNoWriMo was tough. So it's how do I keep saying that NaNoWriMo was hard? So yes, more reels to come. I'll hopefully have one on Tuesday and get back to my weekly schedule.
Okay.
Reels scare me. I'm just like,
They're hard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
much
I'm
admiration.
never that good with them, but then me and
Yeah,
technology
I've
have
lost all steam for real ideas.
Yeah.
a me and technology have a rather fraught relationship as it is. So
Well,
Reels is just yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Instagram is almost simple to a fault with making reels, where it's I want to do all these fun things, and it's no, you can only do these fun things. So they put you in a box. And it's now be creative or be funny or be whatever. So
Yeah,
it can be
my
really tough.
problem is for a 30-second reel, or even 60 seconds, I got the 60-second mark, it takes longer than 60 seconds to make. It takes hours. And especially when I'm costume changing, I'm being different characters and I'm drawing a beard on myself.
Putting the beard on.
Yeah, dude, that takes forever.
See,
Especially when I
that's
only have waterproof mascara, so then it doesn't come off. But it takes forever to film, only for 60 seconds, and it's just man, in those 3 hours that it took to make it real, I could have just been writing or something. So
Yeah.
that's my lack of motivation of I don't want to make one.
that's why I bought a hat that says "This is my costume," so I can just wear that whenever.
I love your
the
your
onesie.
doctor. Oh my god, when you started with the doctor
Oh, the
ones,
doctor.
that cracked me up because you just had doctor over your mask.
Yeah.
We knew who he was.
I want to bring that back. He's one of my
Yes.
favorite Reels characters in my
Oh, he's
Real
hilarious.
cinematic universe.
The Real Cinematic Universe by Sean Donovan.
so Luke, what's going on in 2022 with you?
Okay, I'll say I spent the last few months working on The Girl Who Sings to Dragons, which is the first book in a new fantasy series I've kind of been working on. I'm kind of about this close to getting so last month I'll say I've been working on the feedback, first wave of beta readers gave to me. So I've been basically tweaking things, fixing it up. So I'm hoping within the next couple of days to have it ready to send out for another round of beta reading. Now, what I was hopefully, like Sean, I think with this one I might try traditional publishing for a change with it, just to try something different. So I'm gonna hopefully by the middle of the year, hopefully have sent it to agents, publishers, that kind of thing. Away from that, like I say, I'm about halfway through the second book of the Phoenix Saga. I got started with I managed to make some good headway during NaNoWriMo last year, but then I got sidetracked with everything else. So I need to get back on the horse with that one, because the Phoenix Saga is long overdue another book in it. So the goal is to kind of finish the second half of that, and hopefully maybe have it ready for publishing by the end of this year. And then finally, assuming I have time, I've got a couple of Argent Blade novellas I kind of want to write down, because my plan is to write the final book of that series in 2023. So these kind of novellas I have in mind are kind of like bridge the gap between Plague Carrier and book 3. So I say, time permitting, that's the plans for 2022 on my side of things.
I'm looking forward to that Edmund one.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Best
Nice.
vampire ever.
So now you're saying, like, when I pick up Argent Blade Plague Care, I have to wait over a year to find out how it ends.
Well, like I say, I can promise you it's going to be big, because I have to pull out all the stops for the third book.
I can't believe that.
Yeah,
That's what we do. Is we go hard or we go home for the third.
Oh yeah, third book's always a big
Yeah.
bang.
You know, so you can talk with air of providence.
Yeah.
Yes,
we
that was
will.
so good.
Please.
Yeah, I think it's so true. Just as indie authors, we talked about on one of the other lives, which everybody can go back and watch the recorded lives. They're up on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. Is just that the turnaround time might seem long as a reader, and as readers ourselves, it's like, I want to read the next book, but then when you're in the writer's seat, it's like, oh gosh, I've only got a year to write the thing, edit the thing, get it all prepped, get it out, and it's just a totally different thing. And so if you're new and you're watching right now, everybody on this live is sort of an indie author, and so that means that we are in charge of everything, the editing, the formatting, the cover designing. So it's quite an adventure.
It's like I've always said, well, I've explained to people who aren't who aren't writers themselves. I say both sides of it come, it's kind of a double-edged sword, whichever way you go, traditional or indie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, so what's up in 2022 is it going to be you said the third volume of the Lightning Bride series?
Yes, yeah, the third big bang, go out with a bang. Third book will be 2022. A novella will come first. I originally wanted that to be December of 21, but I am just slogging away at it. I lost motivation. I didn't finish Nano. I hit Thanksgiving and just stopped writing. And I'm like, I can't get it back. I call it my muses, and they were singing for a little bit. I hit a breakthrough with this novella. And then I wrote a little with book 3. Book 3 was my Nano goal, or at least writing half the book for Nano, because that was only 50K. But yeah, I will, it will be out there, date TBD sometime in this year, but I have plans for second novella early 2022, third book mid 2022, and then third novella late 2022. So,
cool.
Yeah, so finishing.
So we don't have to wait until December 31st, 2022 for Gold from the Forest Heir. Thank God.
No. Yeah, so that's
So
book
after the way the Golden Wolf ended, I need the next book.
I know, and that's what we were talking about. Is as a reader, it's you need the next book, and then as a writer, I cannot tell you how much panic and anxiety I have of oh my god, I left it at a cliffhanger. Now I have to write the third book. Readers are gonna read it. Readers are gonna want the third book. I'm trying.
And you do the genius things, DM, by when you do your novellas, you don't tease stuff to come. You do prologues, you go back. So
but I do tease. No, that's the thing is they're prequels, but I do tease what's coming.
That is
Yeah,
true.
exactly. So I
this
remember
next
reading
novella-
The Mermaid's Shadow and seeing things that kind of become, that's what makes sense in The Lightning Bride now.
Yeah. So The Mermaid's Shadow, this isn't spoilers, but it's a prologue, or not a prologue, prequel to the main character's Lightning Bride's parents, but I also tease the main character in the second book, I put a little Easter egg. There's something with a knife. For anybody who's read The Mermaid Shadow, or for anybody who's going to read The Mermaid Shadow, look for a knife that plays an important role in The Golden Wolf, and also, or actually, it played a role in The Lightning Bride, and it also plays a role in The Wizard's Goddess, which is the next novella. So this knife was more important than I wrote it to be, and it just kind of like told me like, hey, I'm interlinked in all these scenarios. But yeah, so then The Wizard's Goddess, there's a few little things that I'm like hinting in the Forest Air. So. Even though
exciting.
it's a prologue of.
Little
yes,
Magic says
Writer's
Writer's
Block
Block
is-
is hard.
Yeah, I know about it.
Little burst.
Quite a really
Worst.
sure the Phoenix
Yeah.
Saga has taken so long for me.
Yeah, so Writer's Block is hard. How do you guys work through your Writer's Block?
Oh, man, I used to wait for it to end, and that was not the way to go. So now I force myself to write something, because you can't edit a blank page. You can always go back and edit bad writing, but at least you wrote something. So I just write something. I just like, even if it's they walked down the road, you know, I can go back and describe the road later, or like the town or
Right.
something. So.
For me, in the pre-pestilence days, I'd go swimming. Now I go running. I find the exercise gets the wheel turning again. Half the time I find myself talking out loud, like I say, working through where I hit the walls. Next thing you know, I'm talking to myself, what characters are saying, what's happening around them. It works. It really does work. I think I'm planning to also get healthier in the new year, so I imagine I'm going to take a notepad with me to the gym in between, so like I say, just like,
I need
Matthew,
to get
you beat out the
a.
frustration with a lightsaber?
Who doesn't have a lightsaber?
Yeah, Luke's the one.
His name is Luke, and he doesn't have
I'm
one.
working on it.
Like, I even have a plastic one that I played when
When
I
it
was
comes
like
to
10 years old.
sci-fi bases, Warhammer 40,000 is my thing more
That's
than
true.
Star
Fair enough.
Wars.
That's fair.
That's fair.
But yeah, I need to get a voice recording like app or something. Or I had a recorder somewhere. I don't know where it is, or it's probably dead. But yeah, because so many inspirations come like when I'm driving. It's like I can't write this down, or else I'll
Yeah.
crash.
I've tried using like notes when I'm driving, and I'm telling one thing and notes is telling me another thing, and I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? Or maybe that's what I'm actually saying. I don't know, but
Do you also have those like sleepy notes of like right as you're falling asleep, you have this like burst of inspiration, and then you wake up and you're like, what the heck was I
oh
writing?
yeah, I write the most epic summary and I read it, and I'm like, that's the dumbest.
on.
What? Who wrote that?
Sleepy Sean is not allowed to write.
No, he's not allowed to write. He can only read.
So, Matthew, what's going on in 2022?
I'll just give my quick 2 cents on the writer's block thing real quick.
Yes.
So DM and Sean, you guys will get a kick out of this. Luke, we've got to get you on Stormlight at some point. But
yes.
whenever I have writer's block, I'll listen to the graphic audio for Stormlight, and that usually rechurns everything.
I feel that. Yeah. When I was listening to the audiobooks, I swear I did like my best writing, because I was just like listening to Sanderson's prose, and then it's like I'm so inspired to then write that.
That's true.
But in regards to 2022, so my main project right now is finishing the second book of the Seaworth Chronicles. That was my nano project to add 50,000 words to that book, which I did, but it's still not done. So book 2 is looking to be, it's probably going to be at least 100K. So it's going to be much longer than the first one. And then I've gone through the 4th draft of my first Seaworth Chronicles book, and I'm sending out queries for that. So like Sean and Luke, I want to try and get that traditionally published. Fingers crossed.
Got it.
And then, 2 more things. So recently got my first book, Maven Knight, done as a hardcover, which I am very pleased with. So I am going to try and do that for the other 2 books. And I'll also probably start maybe putting out feelers for beta readers for my science fiction heist story, Outrider. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of drafting and pitching in the future.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pitching is near and dear to my heart. I think I don't know that I'd be where I am without it. This time last year, I was working 2 full-time jobs and then writing on the side, and I was trying to get my editing up to where I could edit full time instead of just edit on the side and leave customer service and office life behind me after 7 years.
The dream.
And I don't think I would have made it here if it had not been for pitch coaching, because I'm a pitch coach. So I was like helping people, and then one after another. I got 9 people signed last year, and then one of their books hit #1 on Australian Amazon charts, and then it's like just barrel rolled. And I was like, okay, now I got to decide, do I want to write for a living, or do I want to like edit for a living, or what I want to do? And because if you're watching, indie authors, most of us have real jobs too.
Yeah.
It's like we
they don't
write
really
around a
We're
real job.
all working to coming, let's say, the next Rowling, the next Martin, the next, so we can kick back, quit our jobs, and just write full time.
Yeah, the dream.
Yeah, and then you got to fund the books too.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, funding the books, marketing the books. Like that's the part of indie author stuff they don't tell you about.
Yep.
Never ends.
Yeah.
So go indie in 2022 is the nutshell version there. But yeah, I put my writing on hold mostly during Val, because sort of like Sean, I spent so much time getting Val ready, like 4 years getting it ready. And then once it came out, I was like, shoot, I should have been using the time it was in all those edits to like write another book. But I didn't think about that. So I was like too busy working and editing and didn't worry about it. So this year is a big year for me. I'm trying to crank out writing and editing. I've got the first dark fantasy romance I've ever written is going to come out in the Realm of Darkness box set in October. And I'm also trying to write Starfire Express. And that's my portal adventure fantasy. And that one's been interesting because it's actually going to be mostly a UK release. So it's all been in like UK English. And that's stretched my comfort zone a little bit. But I mean, it will release in the US too, but it's primarily a UK release, with much love to the abundant 60+% of my readers which are in the UK. So yeah, busy year. So somebody asked on a live yesterday something, and I've been carrying it over to all the lives because I thought it was just such a great question and not one I normally get. And it's, why did you end up going with the specific genre of fantasy that you have found yourself writing in as opposed to the others? And in your case, Matthew, sci-fi. How did you end up writing that specific genre?
I guess we'll go in the other order again.
Okay.
That's go ahead, Sean. Take it away.
Let's see. Why did I think so the idea that has now become what it is first started as like an urban fantasy, and it never sat well with me. Not that I don't have anything against urban fantasy, but I wanted to write what I was reading, which was a lot of darker, more Martin-esque, gritty fantasy. Game of Thrones was at its peak. I was reading stuff like the Night Angel trilogy, starting to read some more Joe Abercrombie. So I think I just kind of immersed myself in that genre and kind of found a comfort zone where fantasy, you can do anything you want with limits that you set. It's almost kind of like indie publishing in that way. So yeah, I think I just, and I've always read fantasy. I've read, like Ranger's Apprentice as a kid, Aragon, Percy Jackson, Harry Potter, all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of like, it's the write what you know, but what I know is fantasy sort of thing. So I think that's mostly it. And then on the short story side of things, I like to read a lot of horror and science fiction. And I like the quick burst moral message of those. So I think, writing horror and science fiction, because I really love the Twilight Zone. So just kind of writing in that mindset of like, teehee, dark ending, twist, humanity sucks. Writing in that way kind of opened itself up to horror science fiction short stories. So.
All right.
I guess it's my turn now. So it's difficult for me to pinpoint really, because So I've always really like read what you'd call fantasy or classify as fantasy. So I was reading those kind of stories growing up, and then I think about the time I started, like say, thinking about writing, like say, writing with the idea of publishing something. I was really reading a lot of books by I don't know if you know the publishing company Black Library, but so they publish predominantly Warhammer Fantasy, Warhammer 40,000 late fiction. Like so, the grimmer, darker aspects, like the fantasy and sci-fi, they like published kind of like I say just bled into my own, like I say, my own attempts to write it. So I say concepts are like magic is a dangerous force that has negative repercussions if you misuse it. Things that say the worlds are say not quite as like nice and airy as you see in things like Tolkien or C.S. Lewis. I say monsters run rampant. So say just things like that. So put a new, like say, a darker and grimmer slant on, like say, classic fantasy ideas and tropes. Just like really appealed to me, and so that just ended up bleeding into my own like attempts to write stories of my own. Like I say, dark fantasy just seemed like the obvious path to go down. I mean, initially I didn't even realize that was a genre until I started looking through what I'd written and realized, yeah, this does really kind of like say feel like that.
Mm-hmm. That's crazy. I said earlier in 2021, I was like, Luke is in my mind one of the kings of dark fantasy, where it's just balanced so perfectly between gory and gritty and grim enough to really ramp up the stakes of the story without going too far into, okay, this is just gory to be gory or just grim to be grim.
Yeah.
So
I'll have to make sure I keep it that way when Book 2 of the Phoenix Saga comes out.
So for me, I guess it really started at like, it was like age 8 or 10, like around that, where it was like 3 predominant series were like brought into my life, and that was Lord of the Rings, Pirates of the Caribbean, and Star Wars. And Star Wars, I'm not, I don't think I would be a sci-fi writer. There's one futuristic idea I have in mind, but I don't consider myself a sci-fi writer. That I took more of fantasy, of like the lightsabers and the force, like the magic of the force. So I really liked magic, and then Lord of the Rings is epic fantasy, and then Pirates of the Caribbean, I just, for whatever reason, I'm obsessed with pirates. So that's where the nautical fantasy of the Kingdom Isles began, of like pirates. And the way that I write is like I start basically with fan fiction and mold it into my own, of like when you don't recognize where it came from anymore. So it's like you'll read the Kingdom Isles and you'll get the Pirates of the Caribbean feel, but it's my own story with my own characters. And yeah, I just and like I said, I have a bunch of other series. So it's like they probably are all fantasy, but they're like different branches off of fantasy. Like Luke said, dark fantasy, and then this I classify nautical fantasy. And then I have one that's like steampunk, but even that, like there's magic involved in that too. So I'll have to figure out all the genres. I'm so bad with putting things in boxes. Fantasy is like the main genre of like what I write.
Yeah.
Well, so many new genres came out on Amazon last year. I was scrolling through the master list at the end of the year, and I was blown away. Like science fantasy is on there now. There's before, like my genre is not occult paranormal, but it does have paranormal and dimension sides to it. So before I was having to put my book out as paranormal occult fantasy, and now I've been able to switch it to paranormal metaphysical fantasy. And so there's like all these new genres out, and it's just great because it's less restricting. And if you're watching and you're an author, I have a video that I probably need to update on my YouTube of how I sorted through all the numerous genres and came up with the ones I chose for Val. But that was before the expanded list that had like new adult fantasy and new adult fiction and stuff like that. So yeah.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot. Yeah, the Kingdom Isles is a new adult, and that was something that I didn't realize was a thing because I started it as young adult. But then I was like, no, this is new adult, and this is a genre that needs to be bigger because it's such like there's such a leap from young adult to adult, and it's like no, there needs to be like something in between.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more I think about it, the more I think The Girl Who Sings to Dragons and the books I got planned to come after that probably would fit quite
Yeah.
neatly into like the new adult category. Yeah, so I didn't even realize that was a thing until like, so you see like discussions about it on Instagram. I'm thinking, new adult, what the hell is that? And then you start reading more, and they say, it all falls into
We hear about
place.
young adult all the time, but new adult, it's like, where did this
Like,
come
you
from?
go into any bookshop and you see like you'll see a lengthy like section of like young, let's say entitled young adult, but new adult, say it's like I say, just literally crept out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It really
It needs
does
to go
need
up
more
from being an
attention.
end cap to being like an aisle now.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So how'd you end up writing your genres, Matthew?
So I've been really big into science fiction my whole life. I grew up with like Star Wars prequels, with the Halo video games, so that was a big influencer on me when I was growing up. I wrote a lot of Star Wars fan fiction when I was in college. So then Maven Knight actually started out as steampunk, which was, it was more focused on just the grittiness, it was a little bit more wacky. Still had the magic and everything, but then I read the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown, and the way that series, it's phenomenal science fiction, and it doesn't feel like science fiction per se. Like it's a full-on character story with a sci-fi backdrop, and it really just spoke to me, and made me want to kind of change the aesthetic while keeping the core of my series intact, which was it's character driven. But I also just like writing spaceships in weird worlds.
Nothing wrong with that. We all got.
Yeah.
You're not going to write something you enjoy. What's the point of it?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. You write what you want to read.
Yeah,
Yep.
and that's not to say that I don't like writing fantasy. I'm having a blast writing Seaworth Chronicles because it's been different from Maven Knight. I get to do more
Absolutely.
traditional fantasy stuff.
Mhm.
Kind of tap more into Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, and I think for me, I had a really hard time. As I said, I made a whole YouTube video of me trying to figure out what my genres were. I had a really hard time being like, what buckets do I fit in? It's harder when it's your own work. Like I can look at somebody else's book and go, okay, your book is this, this, this. Take it and go. But when it's yours, you're like, well, is it this or is it that? And
the problem was, as you say, science fantasy is now a new genre. That wasn't out when I tried to publish Maven Knight. 2018, there was just science fiction.
Which is weird
Yeah.
because like a lot of bookstores put like sci-fi / fantasy in like the same aisle.
Yep.
So like yeah, you'd see like Star Wars books next to Tolkien, and it's just like,
yeah.
but yeah, half of your books really is perfect. Yeah, so now that genre is out there, that's perfect.
Yeah, and then like it's weird that it took so long because Star Wars is sci-fi.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's space wizard. Like
They
that's
were
what
Space Wizard.
And
They were
if you
so
consider
close, yeah.
even
It's
before
like-
that, the Dune
Yeah,
series
Dune, yeah.
is science
Yeah.
fantasy.
Oh, yeah.
Like Star Wars, Dune, Warhammer 40,000, they probably all fit under the umbrella of science fantasy, really.
Mm-hmm.
More than just like pure science fiction. Really.
Yeah, so it's there. It's just official now.
Yeah, I know Matthew and I had a whole video about,
that's
Star
right.
Wars, whether it's science fiction, whether it's science fantasy. And, as far as the book goes, I felt like the book was more sci-fi-ish than necessarily how the movies portray. But I was a huge Timothy Zahn reader, and it shaped a lot of my love for science fiction as a whole, especially space operas. Just love them. But I don't think I could ever craft one. So I'll just sit back and write my fantasy and read Matthew and Sean's and Luke. You've got a science fiction you're working on, right?
Not at the moment. Like I say, it's an idea in the back of my head. I mean, Argent Blade kind of has some kind of sci-fi overtones to it. Like I say, kind of, it's more, I say, towards the fantasy. I say, I'm like you. I'm tempted by the idea of doing sci-fi, but I don't know if I could really do it justice. So, there's a few ideas, but that's a problem for another day. I mean, I've got enough on my plate as it is at the minute, writing-wise.
See, Luke, this is how you start with science fiction. You just write Star Wars fan fiction.
That's true. That is a very good point.
'Cause
Star Wars
every-
fan fiction writers,
I do
check.
have a couple,
Yep.
I do have a couple of ideas in that regard. I mean, most of them seem to involve, like, say, Sith. So maybe something down the line.
Because from our live on Galactic Writing, like listening to what you both had concocted for your sequel trilogy rewrite, like that was awesome.
Yeah, that's a slippery slope.
It's a slippery slope.
Well, thank you all
Take
so
your
much.
fan fiction and meld it into your own until it's
Yeah, Star Wars fan fiction and Lord of the Rings fan fiction were some of my earlier writings, and
Yeah, exactly. I think we've all probably dabbled in fan fiction at some point or other. I mean, I did at university. I think the rest of you must have as well.
mhm.
I
Yeah.
like just started making characters. Like I had like Gandalf's niece or something, and then like Obi-Wan's sister, lover. I don't know.
Gandalf's niece. That's a story I would read.
And then, reading through the Silmarillion, I was like,
Oh,
this
God.
is something that this character I want more of. So then just like expanding a little bit. But, of course, I'm never actually going to try to put that stuff out. If you're watching,
No.
don't try to publish your fan fiction.
No,
But it's a really good starting point. And unless you
What-
do it like DM Sontag said, and you change it and you change it and you change it till it's not obviously a fan fiction anymore, it's turned into its own world.
thing.
But yeah, so we've had so many people on today. Thank you all for joining and watching us and starting your 2022 with us. And thank you all, the writers of Rohan, for joining
They've been here.
Of
to
course.
kick off
Thanks for having me.
2022. You guys are the grand finale for our whole weekend. So if anybody has missed any of the prior genres, like we did fairy tale retellings and dragon fantasy and young adult dark fantasy, those are all up on the recordings, and you can see the schedule on my website too. But it's truly been such a pleasure getting to meet so many amazing authors face to face this weekend. Like, as much as I've interacted with Sean, I've never once had a live with
Yeah.
Sean. And as much as I've messaged DM Sontag, I've never once had a live with you or like talked to you face to face. So it's great to meet you.
Bruce back on, and you need to come on.
Thank you.
We need more tavern episodes.
Yes, we're
Yeah.
coming on.
Yes. Well, all right. I hope everybody has a great new year, and we look forward to
Yeah.
all the cool books in 2022.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Here's to 2022, everybody.
Indeed.
It'll be a
Bye.
good
More
year.
books,
Happy New
less
Year.
pestilence.
Take
Yeah,
care, everybody.
Yes,
Bye, guys.
down with the pestilence.
Down with the pestilence.